Orhan got kicked out of the heroes' party by his own teammates, the party he literally built from scratch. Instead of giving up, though, he starts solo grinding in the dungeon and realizes he's actually way more powerful than anyone gave him credit for. He ends up crossing paths with Selma, the most famous enchanter in the country, who actually respects him and brings him on to help with a big dungeon expedition for rookie adventurers. Oh, and his old teammate Luna showed up begging him to come back. He said no and walked away. The story begins with Orhan wandering alone through the depths of a dungeon, looking like a man who had lost his sense of purpose. His eyes were hollow, his steps heavy. Then a demon rat crossed his path. Almost on instinct, he reached for the sword at his side, a blade he hadn't drawn in what felt like a lifetime. He turned, locked eyes with the creature, and cut it down in a single clean strike. Clean, but not perfect. He could feel the rust in his movement, the stiffness of muscles that had been neglected for far too long. The sound of the kill, however, drew attention. More rats swarmed in from the shadows, rushing toward him with hungry aggression. But they had made the mistake of targeting the man who had once built the heroes' party from the ground up. One after another, he put them down without breaking a sweat. As he stood over the scattered monster cores on the dungeon floor, something shifted inside him. Maybe he wasn't as far gone as he thought. Maybe there was still something left worth fighting for. But before he could even process that thought, a group of goblins emerged and surrounded him. These were a different threat entirely, far stronger than the rats, and Orhan knew it. He wasn't about to be careless. He reached inward and cast his own support magic on himself, something he had rarely ever thought to do before. The enchantment surged through him, sharpening his reflexes, hardening his body, and making his blade feel like an extension of his very will. The goblins charged. It didn't help them. He moved through them like a force of nature, fast, precise, and devastating. As the last of the first wave fell, something clicked in the back of his mind. He had spent so long using his magic to empower others that he had never stopped to realize how monstrous it felt when directed at himself. He barely had a second to process that revelation before the second wave hit. His enchantment was burning out fast, but he refused to slow down. He threw himself into the chaos head first, carving through goblin after goblin, even chasing one down at the end just to make sure it didn't escape. When the buff finally faded, he took stock of the situation and made a mental note. The spell held for roughly 3 minutes in active combat. That was his window. He would have to be surgical about when he used it. As if the dungeon was testing his patience, a third wave poured in immediately. He weathered the storm, holding his ground with raw skill alone until the right moment came. Then he triggered the enchantment one final time, riding that burst of power through the last of the goblins until the horde was completely wiped out. Standing in the silence that followed, staring at the lifeless body of the last goblin, his mind drifted back to the night that had broken him. He remembered it clearly. Oliver had walked into his study alongside Anne and Dirk, and without hesitation told him he was being removed from the party. Orhan had stood there in stunned disbelief, struggling to make sense of the words coming out of his best friend's mouth. He turned to Oliver and demanded an explanation. They were supposed to be brothers, friends from the same village, but Oliver had been cold and distant, as though he were reading from a script. He told Orhan plainly that friendship didn't change the fact that he was the weakest link on the team. Anne and Dirk didn't hold back either. They both agreed that Orhan had been doing nothing but slowing them down, holding the entire party back from reaching their true potential. Orhan felt his whole world collapse as the reality sank in. This was a party he had created, a party that had climbed through dungeon after dungeon and earned the name the Heroes Party through blood and sacrifice. And now they were throwing him out of it. Oliver explained his reasoning coldly. During their last joint dungeon run, he had observed the enchanters from other parties, how skilled and effective they were, and in comparison, Orhan had fallen painfully short. Orhan fired back immediately, reminding them that he was never an enchanter to begin with. He had only taken on the role because nobody else in the party had any aptitude for magic. He had abandoned his identity as a swordsman, trained from scratch in a field that didn't come naturally to him, and even developed his own unique style of support magic just to fill the gap. He had given up everything for these people. Ain laughed. She mocked him openly, calling him a man full of excuses, and pointed out that Oliver had always been the better swordsman anyway. Orhan's eyes moved to Oliver as a last, desperate hope, but Oliver simply told him that they had already found a replacement enchanter, someone who would actually help them rise. There was nothing left to say. Orhan accepted it. He turned to leave, and as he did, Anne got in one final dig, telling him that someone with A-rank swordsmanship and A-rank magic had no business being in an S-rank party. A jack of all trades and master of none, she called him. Her words followed him out of that memory and back into the present, where he walked through the dungeon corridor with quiet, burning resolve. He thought about the new combat style he had been developing, one that blended the swordsman and the mage into something no one had ever seen before. If they wanted to call him a jack of all trades, fine. He would master every single one of them. And when the time came, Oliver and the others would understand exactly what they had thrown away. He was just about to leave the teleportation room when 4 adventurers came sprinting in, completely out of breath. Their leader was trying to reassure the group that they had made the right call pulling out when they did, since the number of orcs had been far beyond what they expected. One of the members, however, pointed out quietly that they had left a girl behind. The leader dismissed it without a second thought. She had just joined their party that day, and naturally he had prioritized the people he had known longer. Leaving her behind, in his mind, was simply practical. That logic hit Orhan like a blade to the chest. The wound of his own abandonment was still raw. He turned toward them and told them exactly what he thought of people like them. One of the men tried to get physical, reaching out to strike him. Orhan grabbed him effortlessly and put him on the floor without even raising his voice, then told the group to get out of his sight. He turned to their leader, demanded to know where they had left the girl, and ran. He found her at the far end of a cave, completely cornered. She had her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face, desperately holding up a defensive shield as a mob of orcs closed in around her. Her shield cracked, then shattered. The orcs moved in for the kill. Orhan arrived just in time. He unleashed a burst of wind magic that sent the orcs stumbling backward, buying just enough space. Then he drew his sword and charged in. The first orc swung hard at him, trying to bury him into the ground. He blocked it cleanly and countered with his reinforcement magic already active, slicing through the creature as though it were made of air. The girl watched from behind, bewildered. She couldn't tell if he was a swordsman or a mage, because somehow he was clearly both. He layered magic onto his blade mid-combat, sharpening it further before cutting through weapons and armored bodies alike. As he fought, he acknowledged to himself that those men hadn't been entirely wrong, that many orcs at once would have overwhelmed a normal group. But he also knew that he would rather fall in that cave than leave someone behind the way he had been left behind. That thought alone kept his blade moving. With one final sweeping assault, he cleared the cave. Every orc fell. Only cores and silence remained. He turned toward the redhead at the far end of the cave, but she had already collapsed from the adrenaline wearing off. By the time the two of them made it out of the dungeon and into the fading light of the evening, she had recovered enough to introduce herself. Her name was Sophia, and she insisted on taking him to dinner as a small thank you for saving her life. Orhan accepted. She led him to a tavern connected to the Silver Rabbits Guild, and from the crest on her cape, it became clear that she was a member. Something about her nagged at the back of his mind, a sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place. That confusion resolved itself quickly when Sophia introduced him to her older sister, Selma, who Orhan recognized immediately. Selma was the most powerful enchanter in the entire country and the architect of the modern party role system, the framework that divided adventurers into attackers, tanks, and support mages that nearly every party now followed. Selma's eyes landed on Orhan with immediate suspicion. The age gap between him and her 14-year-old sister made her reach for her phone. Orhan told her to relax and assured her his name wasn't anywhere it shouldn't be. Sophia jumped in and explained that Orhan had just saved her life down in the dungeon. That seemed to settle Selma down, at least enough to have a conversation, though she still took a moment to scold her sister for sneaking off to a dungeon alone without telling anyone. The three of them talked over dinner. Orhan told Selma that he had been cut from the hero's party and was essentially on his own now. He caught a flicker of interest in her eyes and could already guess where her mind was going. Before she could get there, he told her up front that he had no intention of joining any party for the foreseeable future. Selma told him not to flatter himself and asked if he was open to a job instead. She explained that her guild was running a large dungeon expedition the following day. It would be filled with new adventurers, and the senior members were responsible for making sure the floor bosses, which appeared every 10 levels, were handled and that no one got killed. The expedition had a sponsor behind it, and she wanted Orhan to come along as additional support. She also told him that she genuinely respected his abilities, and that was the only reason she was asking. Those words landed harder than she probably intended. The whole reason he he had been kicked out in the first place was because his former party had seen Selma perform and decided they needed someone on her level. And here was Selma herself telling him she respected him. Orhan agreed, but on one condition. He would enter the dungeon as a swordsman only. He was done being a mage. Selma looked slightly uncertain about that, but decided that having him along was worth more than debating his role. She figured that when things got dangerous enough, he would naturally fall back on his magic anyway. After dinner, Orhan stopped by a familiar shop to pick up some new gear. The old man behind the counter lit up the moment he saw him, greeting him like family. He had been Orhan's go-to for armor and weapons since the very beginning, back when Orhan had no reputation, no party, and no name. That history made what Orhan had to say next all the harder. He told the old man honestly that he had been removed from the hero's party, which meant his endorsement wasn't worth much anymore. Nobody would care what sword he carried or where he bought his armor. He apologized for letting him down. The old man said nothing for a moment. Then he smiled. He thanked Orhan for everything he had done and told him simply that people would still listen to him because he was a good person, and good people with real strength always found their way back to the top. It was such a small thing to say, but it broke through something in Orhan that all the goblin hordes and orc mobs hadn't been able to touch. Someone still believed in him. That was enough. He made a quiet promise to himself right then and there. He would rebuild from the very bottom, and he would not stop until he had proven every single one of them wrong. The following morning, Orhan made his way to the Silver Rabbit clan's headquarters alongside Sophia. Their leader, a man named Vince, welcomed them warmly and wasted no time making Orhan feel at ease. When Orhan expressed that it was an honor to stand before the head of such a renowned clan, Vince simply smiled and told him to drop the formality. As far as he was concerned, the two of them were equals. He made it clear that he already knew about Orhan's contributions to the hero's party and understood the real weight of what he had brought to that team. Rather than exchanging pleasantries, Vince suggested they get straight to the point and focus on the matter that had actually brought them together, the teaching expedition. He turned to Selma, and she laid out the plan. Over the course of 3 days, their group would descend through the dungeon from the very first floor all the way down to the 51st. The first day's target was floor 21, the second day would push them further to floor 36, and on the third and final day, they would aim to conquer floor 51 entirely. As Selma spoke, her mind briefly drifted back to the conversation she had shared with Vince the evening before, the moment she had told him that Orhan had been cut from the hero's party. Vince's reaction had been immediate. He called it the biggest mistake the hero's party had ever made, reasoning that without Orhan holding everything together, their performance would drop dramatically. Selma had agreed completely. She knew better than most what Orhan's support magic had meant for that party. On paper, his raw power didn't match the very top S-rank support mages, but what he lacked in raw strength, he more than compensated for with his casting speed, which ran at least 4 times faster than even her own. She also remembered watching him fight firsthand. He had been weaving his own original spells into combat seamlessly, all while reading the battlefield with a level of clarity and precision that she had rarely seen in anyone. Without him, the hero's party would struggle to hold on to their position at the top, and that opened a window for the Silver Rabbits to move in and claim that title for themselves. Vince had found one thing difficult to understand, though. Why would someone as gifted as Orhan agree to a joint dungeon expedition where he stood to gain very little? Selma had answered that honestly. Support mages, no matter how skilled, rarely received the recognition they deserved. She herself was famous, but only because her magic was flashy enough to catch people's attention. The truly powerful ones worked in silence, propping others up while remaining invisible in the eyes of the crowd. Her thoughts returned to the present when Orhan's voice cut through the room. He asked Selma to confirm the structure of the expedition. 10 parties of rookies entering the dungeon, with 5 escorts overseeing them, including Selma and himself. The rookies would handle the monsters in rotation, and the escorts would step in only if something beyond their capability appeared. That part made sense. What didn't was the number of escorts. If the goal was to keep the rookies safe, why bring only 5 S-rankers instead of multiple A-rank parties spread across the group? Selma explained that having too much coverage would remove the pressure entirely, and the whole point was for the rookies to genuinely feel the weight of dungeon exploration, not to be shielded from it so completely that they came out overestimating themselves. Orhan didn't fully believe her reasoning. He suspected there was something the Silver Rabbits weren't telling him, but he let it go. He accepted. Vince looked pleased. He He told Orhan that he would receive 2 gold pieces up front, with 10 more upon completion. Orhan paused at that. He asked if that wasn't excessive, but Selma told him plainly that they valued what he brought to the table, and they wanted to make sure he was paid accordingly. Orhan thanked them, confirmed he would be at the dungeon entrance the next morning, and hoped for the best. Morning came quickly. Orhan arrived at the dungeon entrance to find a crowd of new adventurers already gathered, buzzing with nervous energy. He spotted Sophia and Selma among them and offered Selma a compliment on her outfit. Sophia immediately bristled, reminding him again that her sister was a minor. Orhan told her to calm down, assuring her that Michael Jackson wasn't exactly his role model either. Sophia then asked where he was staying now that he no longer had the party's mansion. He told her he was at an inn for the time being, but that he'd find something more permanent soon enough. With everyone present and accounted for, Orhan noted that the group seemed to be fully assembled. Selma agreed and directed Sophia to join her party before walking Orhan over to meet the other 3 escorts. She introduced him as someone she personally trusted and considered extremely capable. The 3 received him without hesitation. A blue-haired man named Ant identified himself as a tank. A blonde man named Burn introduced himself as a second tank. And the last of the 3, a short-haired woman named Kathy, turned out to be the group's healer. Orhan took stock of the lineup, with himself as the frontline attacker and Selma as the enchanter. The 5 of them together formed a remarkably well-balanced escort unit. Still, one thought nagged at him. What exactly had their plan been if he had said no? Something about this whole arrangement felt off, but he filed that thought away and moved on. Selma gathered all the rookies together and introduced Orhan to the group. She told them plainly that they had secured one of the strongest adventurers in the country to accompany them on this journey and that there was nothing to be afraid of. She mentioned that Orhan had reached the 94th floor, a depth that even she herself had not achieved, and that he had been a core member of the heroes' party itself. The rookies immediately lit up, their nerves visibly settled, replaced with a renewed sense of confidence. Orhan, on the other hand, felt the weight of that introduction land squarely on his shoulders. A lot of people were now counting on him, and he felt every bit of it. With the parties distributed and the escorts briefed, Selma told Orhan that he would be leading the 10th party, the most promising group in the entire expedition. She believed that with the right guidance they had the potential to handle even mid-level dungeons without breaking a sweat. That assignment made Orhan's eyes narrow slightly. Giving the most talented party to an outsider with no clan affiliation made very little sense. Once again, something didn't add up, but he walked over to his assigned group and introduced himself. Sophia was there, which wasn't surprising. What was surprising was that the group only had 3 members total. A blonde boy named Logan clarified that it had always been just the 3 of them, because no one else could keep up. He introduced himself as the party's enchanter, boldly claiming that he intended to surpass Selma herself one day. Orhan recognized the attitude immediately. Raw confidence without the experience to temper it, the kind that had a habit of getting people killed in dungeons. He kept the thought to himself and moved on to the next member. The second was a girl named Carol, who introduced herself as the party's tank. Orhan noticed immediately that she wasn't wearing any armor. He asked if she planned to equip it inside the dungeon. Carol replied that she didn't use armor or shields at all. She relied entirely on speed and evasion to protect the group. Dodge-type tanks were rare for a reason. That style demanded an exceptional level of combat experience and battlefield awareness that simply couldn't be faked. Looking at Carol now, Orhan could see she didn't have it yet. He asked if the clan had warned her about the risks. Logan answered for her, confirming that the clan had repeatedly advised Carol to operate as a conventional tank until she had more experience under her belt. She had ignored every single one of those warnings. Orhan began to understand why this group had been assigned to him. The Star Party was also the problem party, the one the other escorts hadn't wanted to deal with. Regardless, the expedition launched without further delay, and all the parties descended into the dungeon together. Carol proved immediately that she had no concept of silence, peppering Orhan with questions about why he had left the heroes' party from the moment they stepped inside. He couldn't find a way to make her stop. To manage the burden on the group, he quietly set up magical traps along their trail as they moved, allowing the traps to deal with smaller monsters automatically so the party wouldn't waste energy on unnecessary fights. By the time they reached the 20th floor, Orhan had formed a clear picture of each of his 3 charges. Logan, beneath all the bravado, was genuinely talented. His enchanting skills were sharp enough that he could realistically perform at an A-rank level if he kept developing, but he lacked the ability to direct the party effectively, which for an enchanter was a serious flaw. Carol was blindingly fast, which was exactly what a dodge-type tank needed, but her instinct was to charge straight at monsters the moment she spotted them, when her actual job was to stand between the enemy and her party, and her weapons, 2 small daggers, fit her fighting style but raised questions about whether she had enough destructive force for the floors ahead. Sophia, by comparison, had the least raw talent of the 3, but she also had no major weaknesses, made sound decisions, and could be relied on. In a group like this, that steadiness was worth a great deal. At the end of the day's run, the escorts handled the floor 20 boss and the expedition cleared its first milestone. ID cards were registered as proof of completion. Everyone filtered out of the dungeon for the night, and Orhan headed back to rest, already thinking about what the next 2 days would bring. The next morning, however, hit him like a cold bucket of water. He woke to find a newspaper waiting for him, and on its front page was his own face staring back at him. The hero's party had made an official public announcement. Orhan had been removed from the team, and a new enchanter had already been brought in to replace him. He had known this was coming. He had accepted it internally, but seeing it printed for the entire country to read made it sting in a way he hadn't quite prepared himself for. There was nothing to be done about it. He folded the paper, pulled himself together, and headed out toward the dungeon, quietly wondering whether the rookies would look at him differently after reading the morning's headline. He didn't make it far before someone stepped into his path. A blue-haired girl stood before him, Luna, the hero's party's healer. Even during the ugliest days at the end of his time with the group, when Oliver and the others had gone cold and distant, Luna had always been the exception. She had kept smiling, kept showing up, kept treating him like he belonged. On the day he had actually been forced out, she hadn't been there. She had been running an errand, and Orhan had always quietly suspected that if she had been present, things might not have gone so smoothly for the ones pushing him out. Luna reached for his hands and held them tightly. She begged him to come back. She told him she would find a way to make the others understand what they had thrown away, that the party needed him, whether they knew it or not. She brought up the promise they had once made together, the 3 of them, the promise to clear the great dungeon side by side. That was the wrong thing to say. The mention of that promise didn't soften Orhan, it lit something darker in him. He pulled his hands back and told her plainly that the promise had been made by 3 people, including Oliver, and Oliver was the one who had looked him in the eye and thrown him out. That promise was dead the moment Oliver broke it. With a heart that still hadn't fully healed from everything, Orhan turned away from Luna and told her simply and finally that he was never going back. Then he walked toward the dungeon entrance and didn't look behind him. On the way, Orhan thinks about how he was banished from the hero's party, and that is exactly what the newspaper had made clear that morning. This meant that all the new recruits were probably confused about what to think of him anymore, especially considering that Selma had hyped him up so much for being from the hero's party. But now, the truth had come crashing down. He soon arrived at the dungeon entrance where he found all the rookies waiting to head in, but the entire energy had completely changed. Logan, on the other hand, thought about how it would have been a different matter entirely if Orhan had left the party of his own free will, but the newspaper had stated clearly that Orhan was kicked out for being too weak, and that changed everything. Orhan tried to greet the rookies but received a mixed response in return. He quickly realized that he was no longer as welcome as he had been just the day before, all because of a stupid newspaper headline. Just then, Selma arrived alongside Ant, Byrne, and Kathy, and immediately apologized to Orhan for the misunderstanding. She was the one who had pushed his connection to the hero's party in order to put the rookies at ease, and now it had backfired. Orhan immediately told her that none of this was her fault, and that she should hold her head as high as ever and lead the group into the dungeon while he provided support from behind. Ant, Byrne, and Kathy all spoke up, making it clear that whatever had gone on between Orhan and the hero's party was irrelevant to them. This gave Orhan some relief from the scrutiny, and he made his way over to his party, where Sophia and Carol greeted him warmly. Logan, however, was visibly hesitant and unsure of how to treat Orhan after everything he had read. head. Orhan decided to break the ice himself. He asked the group whether they had seen the newspaper that morning. Both Sophia and Carol confirmed they had, but insisted it wasn't worth reading. Logan, however, was not the type to look away from the truth and asked Orhan directly whether the newspaper had gotten it right. Orhan replied that, technically speaking, the newspaper was accurate. He had been removed from the hero's party on the grounds that he was too weak, admitting that he was not the hero everyone had been expecting him to be. Sophia could not hold back. She told him he was wrong, insisting that she had personally watched him take on an entire horde of orcs all by himself and defeat every single one of them without breaking a sweat. Orhan thanked her for believing in him, then addressed the rest of the party. He told them that even though he was no longer part of the hero's party, he was still more than capable of getting them safely to the 51st floor, and he asked them to trust him. The girls were satisfied with that. Logan, however, looked disappointed. They entered the dungeon shortly after. The plan for the day was to push through from the 21st floor all the way to the 35th. For now, Orhan's role was still to stand back, observe, and only intervene if things genuinely started to go sideways. Their progress was smooth to begin with. Carol handled all the monsters on the 24th floor with her twin daggers and her aggressive, close-range fighting style. Sophia, meanwhile, stepped up against the larger monsters on the 30th floor and dealt with them effectively, surprising even Orhan, who began to wonder whether he had underestimated her. They soon moved on to the 31st floor, which marked the beginning of the middle levels. From here on, the rookies were in unfamiliar territory and would need proper guidance from their escorts. This time, Orhan moved to the front and led the way, carefully scanning ahead for anything unusual. He soon sensed a group of goblins further in and warned his party to prepare for a fight. He also noticed that a stray orc had wandered into the same area, which added a layer of complication. But given how capable his group had proven themselves to be, he had no doubt they would come out on top. He immediately instructed Carol to go after the goblins and directed Sophia to handle the orc using her long-range magic spells. Both of them moved without hesitation. He then turned to Logan and told him to use his support magic. But before the sentence was even finished, Logan had already constructed several magical circles and was sending agility spells toward Carol to give her an edge against the goblins. Logan still wasn't fully convinced that Orhan was someone worth taking guidance from. Then, things got complicated. The orc triggered something deep in Sophia, and she froze. Her body stopped responding, her focus shattered by a fear she clearly hadn't left behind. With Logan already committed to his spells for Carol, there was no one in a position to step in, or so it seemed. Logan looked over at Orhan, frustrated and helpless, wondering what kind of a guide just stood there and watched. What Logan had missed was that Orhan had already acted. He had quietly constructed a magical sight that drained a significant amount of speed from the orc, questioned whether Orhan had lost his mind. But he ran the spells and waited to see what would happen next. Orhan then directed Carol to engage the tarantula in close combat, and attention stayed locked on her. Carol nodded and charged immediately. Logan instinctively moved to stopped him and explained quickly that if Logan went in, the whole mission would break down and put him at a disadvantage. He needed to hold his position and trust the plan. Orhan then told Sophia to get on top of the monster and drag her blade down its back from end to end. She understood immediately, leaping onto its head, sword the full length of its spine, and reminded her to stay sharp. It was venomous, and she could not afford to take a sit. The creature began driving its pointed legs down at Carol in rapid, but she dodged every strike clean, even deflecting several of them back at the monster. Orhan turned to Logan. Carol's life was in his hands right now, to keep those spells running without a single gap. Logan, his focus locked and didn't waver. Orhan then called out to Sophia to pin it down. She evaded her arrow cutter technique, slashing through his legs and sending it crashing heavily to the ground. Carol let out a cheer, but Orhan warned her immediately. It was not finished. The warning came a breath too late. Rock arrow, while simultaneously casting a sharpness enhancement onto Carol's daggers. Boost hit at exactly the right, giving Carol just enough to wrench herself free. So threw immediately with her rock arrow, which struck the tarantula with devastating and finished the fight in an instant. The day's expedition was over. Orhan to acknowledge Logan directly, telling him that his spell work had been the backbone of every battle they had won that day. Without it, those victories would have been possible. Logan quietly. She activated her arrow cutter technique, slashing through the tarantula's legs and sending it crashing heavily to the ground. Carol let out a cheer, but Orhan warned her immediately. The fight was not finished. The warning came a breath too late. The tarantula, still alive, launched a web that wrapped around Carol and began dragging her toward its body. She struggled against it and called out to Orhan in a panic. He responded instantly, telling Logan to lay her strength up and speed up onto Carol right away. Logan complied without argument, but the web's grip was stronger than Carol's panic allowed her to manage. Orhan turned to Sophia and told her to ready her rock arrow while simultaneously casting a sharpness enhancement onto Carol's daggers. The boost hit at exactly the right moment, giving Carol just enough to wrench herself free. Sophia followed through immediately with her rock arrow, which struck the tarantula with devastating force and finished the fight in an instant. The day's expedition was over. Orhan took a moment to acknowledge Logan directly, telling him that his spell work had been the backbone of every battle they had won that day. Without it, none of those victories would have been possible. Logan absorbed that quietly. By the time they emerged from the caves, the sun was already low on the horizon. Selma gathered all the rookies together and told them they had done outstanding work over the past 2 days. One final push remained. Floor 51, and she wanted everyone to rest properly and eat well before it. Orhan was about to head off alone when Ant and Bern caught up with him and invited him out to dinner. He thought about it briefly, then accepted. It wasn't every day that someone offered to pick up the tab. On the road back to the city, Logan walked alongside Sophia and started asking questions about the first time Orhan had saved her, specifically what spells he had used and how he had moved. Sophia thought back carefully and described what she remembered: a wind blast to open, followed by some kind of enhancement applied directly to his sword, and then every orc around him had fallen one after another. Logan went quiet. What he had seen during today's battles was already turning over in his mind. That spell Orhan had used so casually to slow the orc down, that was a debuff. And debuffs were anything but casual. Even Selma, widely regarded as the finest enchanter in the country, could barely produce a single debuff over the span of several days, and only then after careful preparation. Orhan had done it mid-combat, without pausing for even a moment. And beyond that, he had tracked the timing of every buff and enhancement across the entire fight with flawless precision, knowing exactly when each effect would wear off, anticipating enemy movements before they happened, and structuring the whole battle like a mechanism designed to run without a single flaw. Logan had walked into that dungeon convinced that Orhan's guidance was unremarkable and obvious. He now understood that he had been completely wrong. The man he had dismissed as mediocre was, without any question, a genius. Back in the city, Orhan sat down at a tavern with Ant and Bern. They told him to order whatever he wanted. Dinner was on them. They then got curious and asked about his background. He had served as the enchanter of the hero's party, but was now insisting he was a swordsman. What was the real story? Orhan told them the truth. He said he had always been a swordsman at heart, ever since the day as a boy when he watched his grandfather cut down a massive beast that had wandered into their village with a single powerful strike. That moment had stayed with him, and from then on, becoming a swordsman had never been anything less than a certainty. He had lived that dream for a time as a part of the hero's party, but as the group pushed deeper into the lower levels, progress began to slow. The monsters were becoming stronger and more relentless, and the party's momentum was starting to stall. Around the same time, Selma's team framework, the strategy built entirely around the enchanter directing the battle and supporting every other member, had become the gold standard for serious parties across the country. The hero's party decided to adopt it. The only problem was that nobody in their group had any natural affinity for the role. The best available option, by process of elimination, was Orhan, and so, for the sake of the party, he had stepped down from the role that had defined him and has taken on an entirely new identity. A flash of bitterness crossed his face as he thought briefly about how little chance the hero's party now had to clear the floors ahead without him. He let it pass. It wasn't worth his energy anymore. He told Ant and Bern what he actually wanted to go forward: to become the most well-rounded swordsman alive, someone who could descend into even the lowest dungeon floors entirely on his own, without needing anyone else to fill a gap he couldn't cover himself. He had no way of knowing, as those words left his mouth, that the very next day the hero's party would walk into the same dungeon and come looking for him. The next morning, Orhan made his way toward the cave, thinking about how this was going to be the last day of him leading the young party. He soon spotted Sophia and the others waiting for him not far from the entrance. They all greeted him warmly. and he could already feel that the group had more confidence in him than they had shown the day before. Even Logan seemed far more receptive and trusting. Carol spoke up, saying that since it was the last day, Sophia had something she wanted to tell him, and started nudging her, pushing her to speak her mind. Sophia, however, seemed too shy and intimidated to say what she really felt. It turned out that while bathing the previous night, she had told Carol that she wanted Orhan to stay with the Silver Rabbit clan and help them reach the top. Before she could bring herself to say any of that to him, though, Selma called for Orhan, and he told Sophia he would talk to her later before heading off. While walking toward the other escorts, he overheard some rookies talking about how the heroes' party was also heading into the dungeon that day for a trial run with their new member, just to make sure everyone was working in sync. Orhan wondered which floor they were targeting, and soon learned that they weren't starting from the deepest point, the 94th floor, but from the 92nd, just to test their coordination. He was genuinely shocked. Starting at the 92nd floor with a brand new party member was reckless, and he felt they should have begun from the lower floors to build proper teamwork first. In the end, he reminded himself that the heroes' party was no longer his concern, and shifted his focus back to what he was there to do. Meanwhile, on the 92nd floor, Oliver gathered his team and told them they should have no trouble clearing through, but to stay on guard regardless. He then turned toward Philly, the newest addition to the party and their green-haired enchanter, and the tank encouraged her to show them what she was capable of. The mage chimed in that, unlike Orhan, Philly was no jack-of-all-trades, so there was nothing to worry about. Oliver glanced at Luna, who hadn't said a word. She had been silently opposed to Orhan's removal from the very beginning and wasn't hiding it. Oliver believed that after this dungeon run, even she would have to admit that their decision had been the right one. What Oliver didn't know was that Luna had never been part of the plan to remove Orhan at all. She had only found out about it the evening Oliver was throwing a welcome party for Philly. Anne and Dirk had made fun of Orhan, saying that now that they had a real enchanter, reaching the 100th floor would be no problem. Anne had even mentioned to Philly that the party had a massive amount of funds that Orhan had always been too careful to spend on anything personal. Philly asked, a little uncomfortably, whether party funds were not meant for party use only. Anne brushed it off, saying that money was pointless if you never enjoyed it. Oliver cut in and told them the Orhan talk was over. He was irrelevant now. Just as they raised their glasses to welcome Philly, Luna rushed into the room out of breath and told Oliver she needed to speak with him. She noticed an unfamiliar face and asked if they could speak privately. Oliver told her they could speak right there in front of everyone, so Luna had no choice. She told them she had just heard that Orhan was going on a raid with the Silver Rabbits and asked how that was even possible. Anne and Dirk were confused. Anne asked how he could have joined the Silver Rabbits within just 3 days, especially after being told how weak he was. Dirk assumed he was still riding on his S-rank badge, one he owed entirely to this party. Luna, lost, asked what they were talking about. Oliver told her to calm down and listen, but Anne jumped in first and bluntly told Luna that Orhan had left the party 3 days ago. The news stunned Luna. She asked out loud whether Orhan had finally given up on them. Dirk, never one to hold back, corrected her. Orhan hadn't left. They had kicked him out because he was a loser. Luna turned to Oliver and demanded to know if that was true. Oliver confirmed it calmly and attempted to introduce Philly. Luna immediately cut him off, reminding them that she had made her opposition clear from the start. The tank snapped at her to stop, telling her the new member was trying to greet her. Oliver calmed things down and tried to reason with Luna, telling her that Orhan was no longer good enough for the party and would only hold them back. Luna refused to accept that, insisting Orhan was the core of everything they had built and the primary reason they had made it as far as they had. She told Oliver plainly that there was no way they could go any further without him, and dismissed her, saying she was the only one who thought Orhan was anything special, and that the decision had already been made regardless. Oliver moved on and outlined the plan. Since it was Philly's first time fighting alongside them, they would start from the 92nd floor and work their way toward the 94th. Luna flatly rejected it. She told them she had no interest in getting herself killed. Dirk laughed, pointing out that they had already cleared up to the 94th floor, so starting at the 92nd was hardly dangerous. Luna pushed back, saying that regardless of Philly's skill level, they should build up from the lower floors first. Dirk argued again that they had already cleared floor 93, so what was the point? Luna reminded them that the 92nd floor was home to the Black Dragon, a creature they had barely survived the last time they faced it. Anne laughed it off, saying that had been with a weak enchanter on the team and this time would be completely different. Oliver assured her they were only going to assess their teamwork, not fight the dragon. Luna tried to argue further, but Oliver shut it down. The decision had been made. Back in the present, the heroes' party found themselves face to face with the mammoth of the 92nd floor. Oliver charged at the mammoth and struck, but the mammoth deflected the blow and pushed him back behind cover. Once there, he noticed his buff had already worn off. He turned and asked Philly why their buffs were running out so quickly. She admitted she hadn't yet figured out how they all fought together and said it would improve with time. Oliver was quietly taken aback. He remembered how Orhan had figured all of that out within the first few hours of their very first dungeon run together. The mammoth launched an energy blast at Dirk, who tried to block it but slipped, sending the beam redirecting straight into Anne. She screamed at Dirk for his carelessness. Dirk himself was confused. Anne jumped in and fired her flame attacks at the mammoth, but they barely did anything. Oliver shouted at her to get serious, and she shot back that she was doing exactly what she always did. Oliver told Philly to boost Anne's damage again, and she did, but even the follow-up flame blast left no mark on the mammoth. The creature retaliated immediately and nearly hit Anne. Oliver was stunned. Philly's magic was supposed to be far superior to Orhan's, yet they were struggling against a monster they had cleared without much difficulty before. Another blast snapped him back to focus, and the fight continued to go badly. Oliver called for Anne to flank the mammoth, but it cut her off before she could get into position, forcing her to retreat entirely. Anne snapped at Philly, calling her completely useless and saying they never should have brought her in. Oliver himself was beginning to realize that none of them were performing at the level they were used to. He couldn't even draw the full power of his sword. In theory, Philly's magic should have given all of them a significant boost. So, what exactly was going wrong? Before they could work it out, the black dragon emerged from deep within the dungeon and began flying toward them. Luna went pale and screamed that they needed to leave immediately. The dragon landed and crushed the mammoth beneath it without effort. Oliver was stunned. The dragon was not supposed to leave its territory, but he still refused to fall back, insisting that they had defeated the creature once and could do it again. Dirk got into position to block its fire breath, but the attack sent him flying. Anne tried to respond from behind cover, but even hidden, the blast caught her and knocked her out cold. Luna told Oliver they had to escape. Oliver told Philly to buff him, then charged directly into the dragon's fire with his strongest attack. The shockwave of the clash threw him backward, and he dropped to one knee, dazed, confused, and out of options. Luna grabbed him and told him they needed to use an emergency teleport crystal immediately, or they would all die there. Philly warned that the emergency teleport would drop them directly into a lower-level boss room where they would have to fight whatever was waiting. Luna said they had no other choice. Oliver agreed, gathered the group, and activated the portal. But just before they could step through, the dragon dived in with another attack and, to their absolute horror, flew straight into the portal before vanishing. Dirk, for a brief moment, thought that might be a good thing. Luna immediately corrected him. It was the worst possible outcome. The dragon had just been sent into a lower-level dungeon room where an unsuspecting party of adventurers could be waiting. She told them they had to get back to the guild right away and have them force teleport everyone currently inside the dungeon. Oliver agreed, and they started running. On the way, Luna finally told them the truth about why they had felt so powerless throughout the entire fight. She explained that Orhan had developed a series of original spells that amplified the power of any magic he applied by 50 times. Philly was speechless. Even Selma's highest enhancement only reached a tenfold increase. Luna confirmed it. That was the real reason they had always felt so unstoppable. Without Orhan, they were nothing more than a mediocre group of adventurers. Oliver refused to accept that. He vowed they would kill the dragon without Orhan, and they ran toward the guild, desperately hoping the dragon hadn't already claimed any lives. Back on the 50th floor, Orhan told his party that once they reached the 51st floor, their goal would be complete, and they would head back using the teleportation crystal. Everyone nodded in agreement, but Orhan couldn't shake a bad feeling settling in his gut. He looked around and found nothing out of place. He glanced up at the dark sky, completely blanketed by clouds, and wondered why this unease wouldn't leave him. Everything seemed to be going fine. So why did something feel terribly wrong? Carol's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. She asked what kinds of monsters they could expect to face this time. Orhan noticed the excitement in her eyes and reminded her that her role as a tank was to protect her teammates, not to charge at every enemy hoping to finish them all herself. Carol disagreed, arguing that if she handled the enemies on her own, she was technically making things easier and safer for everyone else. Besides, she said, the front line was exactly where a tank belonged, and that was always where she stood. Orhan sighed and told her she needed to start learning how to work as a team rather than trying to carry everything alone. The deeper they went, the more she would need to rely on her teammates to survive. Carol didn't love the sound of that and called it boring. Logan cut in and told her to pay attention and be grateful for the quality of advice she was receiving, adding that even the great adventurer Albert once said that teamwork was dreamwork. Orhan turned to Logan and asked if he was referring to the Albert from the Silver Rabbit clan. Logan lit up, happy to find someone else who actually read rather than just swinging swords in dungeons. Orhan said he was fairly certain most people knew of Albert. He had been the undisputed strongest member of the Silver Rabbits and was believed to have died fighting the Black Dragon on the 92nd floor the previous year. Logan said that even in death, Albert had become a legend who would never be forgotten. Carol went quiet. She said softly that Albert had died protecting a comrade. She continued, her voice heavier, saying that he knew his death would wipe the smiles from his family's faces, and he did it anyway. That was why, in her view, the best way to defend someone was to keep them as far from danger as possible. If she fought alone on the front line while her teammates stayed back, they would at least be safe enough to run if everything went wrong. Orhan caught the pain behind her words and decided not to push. As an outsider, it wasn't his place. Instead, he chose to lighten the mood and told Carol he would be counting on her to handle the enemies today. Her face immediately brightened, and she told him to leave it to her. Sophia, not wanting to be left out, asked Orhan what areas she needed to improve on as both a mage and a teammate. Logan jumped in right after, saying he wanted to know the same. Orhan told them all to settle down and moved the group forward into the dungeon. Selma pulled him aside briefly, reminding him that today was the final day and the most demanding one yet. They needed to make sure everything went smoothly. She glanced at his group and remarked that the kids seemed to have taken quite a liking to him. Orhan admitted that after the newspaper article, he had expected to lose whatever respect they had for him overnight. He said he had been wrong. They were sharper and more independent than they looked. Selma agreed, saying the group could be a handful but had a bright future ahead. She then brought up Albert, telling Orhan that his death had been a devastating blow for the clan. He had been their cornerstone, and without him, the clan had quickly started falling behind, which was when the heroes' party had pulled ahead. Orhan acknowledged that the Black Dragon had been an incredibly difficult fight for his party as well, and that losing anyone in that battle would have crippled them entirely. Selma said the gap Albert left had never been filled. Then she asked Orhan directly whether he would consider joining their party. He told her it was an honor, but pointed out that a party had no real use for two enchanters, especially when one of them was the finest mage on the continent. Selma flushed slightly, then clarified that she wasn't asking him to join as an enchanter, but as a swordsman. That caught him off guard. She told him she would be watching him closely that day to see what he was capable of with a blade. The group split into their separate parties, and Orhan was left with his three rookies. Carol immediately complained about splitting up, saying she didn't like the idea of getting lost in the cave system. Orhan laughed and explained that splitting up was a useful exercise. Parties often had to divide in order to check multiple passageways simultaneously and find the one leading to the boss room. That was why larger clans like the Silver Rabbits always had the advantage. They could sweep an entire cave system far more quickly. Logan pointed out that since Orhan had descended to the deepest floor anyone had ever reached, navigating this level should be no problem for them. Sophia and Carol crowded around him, asking what the deep floors actually looked like. Orhan told them that the deep floors began around level 72, where the environment shifted into a rugged, frozen mountain landscape, battered by constant blizzards and snowstorms, with ice lizards lurking in the darkness waiting for anyone to let their guard down. He then told them to stay focused, not wanting to unsettle anyone before the day had properly started, and led them deeper in. The cave was completely silent, which made it feel deeply unsettling. Logan noted that they hadn't encountered a single monster on this floor. He asked Orhan if the 40th floor was usually this empty. Orhan shook his head, and the knot in his stomach tightened. His gut feeling was beginning to feel less like paranoia and more like a warning. Carol started grumbling about wanting to fight something when a blue goblin stepped out from behind one of the rocks. She was overjoyed and rushed at it before anyone could stop her. Orhan quickly cast an agility down debuff on the goblin, slowing it just enough for Carol to cut it down in a single strike. She celebrated, but Orhan told her firmly not to rush at enemies without thinking. Blue goblins were fast and dangerous. Had she stumbled, it would have pulled both Logan and Sophia out of position and put all three of them at risk. He could see she understood the mistake mistake, so he decided to turn it into a lesson. He explained a style of active defense, reading the enemy's movements and attacking at the precise moment just before they could strike, effectively canceling their attack entirely and giving the whole party a massive opening. Carol listened with wide eyes. Before she could respond, Logan shoved past her and asked for guidance too. He pointed out that 2 wolf monsters were charging at them from behind, but before they even got close, a magical trap snapped to life and drove spikes into both of them. Orhan told Logan to start incorporating trap spells into his setup. They allowed the rest of the party to stay focused on the enemy in front without having to worry about what might hit them from behind. Logan absorbed every word with barely contained enthusiasm, thinking to himself that he wanted to become exactly the kind of mage Orhan was. Orhan then turned to Sophia and told her she should start practicing using 2 magic spells simultaneously. She said it sounded complicated. He promised her it wasn't as difficult as it seemed. With a little practice, anyone could manage it, and advanced casters could run a dozen spells at once. Sophia was stunned and asked why she couldn't just focus on learning stronger versions of the spells she already knew. Orhan explained that stronger spells required longer preparation time, which left her completely exposed during the charge-up period. If she learned to cast 2 spells at once, she could prepare the second one while the first was still in motion, bringing her downtime to virtually nothing and keeping her protected throughout the fight. With that, they finally reached the boss room, where all the escort groups reunited and told the rookies to stay back and observe while they handled things. Orhan entered the boss room and told the others to focus on attacking. He would handle support. The fight began, and Orhan immediately moved on the offensive, timing his strike perfectly to slash at the monster's legs just as it was about to attack, causing it to stumble backward. Before it could recover its footing, he had already placed a trap behind it, sealing off its retreat. Selma unleashed a multicast, conjuring 5 magical circles simultaneously and firing them all at once. The tank absorbed the counterattack, and the other swordsman finished the monster with a single, clean slash. The rookies watched in stunned silence. Logan could barely process the precision of it. Not a single wasted movement, every action perfectly timed and placed. The expedition pushed forward, clearing one level after another until they finally stood before the boss room on the 50th floor. The boss turned out to be a colossal crab with a shell that was virtually indestructible. Selma told Orhan that he was the strongest among them, and that if he could cut through the giant claw, the rest of them could handle the remainder and they could all head home. Orhan smiled, drew his sword, and walked toward the monster without hesitation. The tank cautioned him that the shell was known to be extraordinarily hard to break. Orhan didn't seem particularly concerned. He launched himself into the air and brought his blade down on the joint of the claw, slicing clean through it with ease. With that threat removed, Selma and the others finished off the crab without much difficulty. Everyone cheered as the expedition came to a close and the group prepared to head back. The celebration didn't last. A suffocating sense of dread washed over Orhan without warning. Then reality itself seemed to tear open, and the black dragon burst through the rift, flying straight toward them. The sight of the black dragon drained the color from Orhan's face. He screamed at everyone to run, but it quickly became clear that he was the only one still capable of thinking straight. Even the A-rank escorts were completely frozen, paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure radiating off the creature. They stood there helplessly, unable to understand why a monster of this magnitude was appearing on such a low-level floor. Selma was the only one managing even a fragment of coherent thought, but even she couldn't move. She knew she needed to take command immediately and get the rookies out alive, but the dragon's aura was suffocating, as though it was physically pulling the oxygen out of the air around them. As she stood there, every horror story she had ever heard about the black dragon flooded back into her mind, the monster that hunted adventurers and slaughtered them beyond recognition. Orhan was already running through every possible way out of this. Then it struck him. They had already cleared this floor's boss, which meant the teleportation crystal at the end of the cave was active. That was their only exit. He turned to rally the others, only to find them all locked in a trance, unable to tear their eyes away from the beast. If they didn't move immediately, the dragon would turn its attention on the group. Monsters were always drawn to large gatherings of people. For a brief moment, a dark thought crossed his mind. He could make a run for the crystal alone. He could definitely survive that way. He crushed the thought immediately, disgusted with himself for even considering it. He wasn't going to abandon them. He was going to fight the dragon and buy them the time they needed to escape. He drew his sword with fierce determination and screamed at the other escorts to get into position. The shout snapped them out of their daze. Selma came back to her senses and immediately ordered everyone everyone into a defensive formation to shield the rookies. The mage threw up a magical barrier to absorb the dragon's incoming attack. Orhan, without hesitation, sprinted toward the dragon and cast a reinforcement spell over the entire group at the same time. It barely held, but it held. The guides stood shaken, fully aware that without Orhan's intervention, they would all be ash right now. Orhan kept moving, dodging the dragon's attacks while carefully retreating, never giving the creature a clean opening to charge up. He pulled out a small dagger and hurled it straight at the dragon's eye. The beast instinctively shut its eye to protect itself. In that split second, he launched himself upward and brought his sword down in a single beheading strike. The slash unleashed a thunderous shockwave that buried the cave in dust and smoke. The guides dared to hope. Orhan didn't. He kept his guard up and waited. As the smoke cleared, the dragon rose back to its feet with a furious roar, completely unharmed. Orhan ordered the escorts to surround the rookies on all sides and make sure not a single one of them got hurt. He would handle the dragon himself. Selma looked uncertain. Orhan caught her expression, smiled, and told her not to worry. He had a plan. He told the rookies to hold on tight, then threw himself back at the dragon. The creature answered with a blast of fiery breath. Orhan dodged it and began running circles around the monster, keeping its full attention locked on himself. Selma and the others watched in stunned silence, awed by both his skill and the sheer nerve it took to face that thing alone, the same beast that had killed the legendary Albert. Selma felt something tighten in her chest. She realized how much she cared about what happened to him, and the thought of losing him to this creature was more than she wanted to sit with. Orhan, however, was entirely in the zone, and in one extraordinary moment he reflected one of the dragon's own fire blasts directly back at it with twice the force. Logan and Sophia stared in disbelief. They had never seen anything remotely like it. They weren't alone. Magical Reflection was one of Orhan's original spells, capable of returning any magical attack back at the caster with double the power, something even the world's finest mages had never managed to replicate. He activated a multicast status boost, opening 6 magical circles simultaneously and amplifying his own capabilities. Selma's breath caught. Even elite mages struggled to sustain more than 3 circles at once. Orhan had opened 6 without visible effort. Before she could decide whether to step in, he cast a second full stat boost on himself, then a third. In total, he stacked and doubled his own stats 6 consecutive times. The escorts were speechless. What he was doing was supposed to be physically impossible. Orhan began to glow, crackling with energy, lightning dancing across his body. The dragon lunged with a tail sweep. Orhan vanished and reappeared on a ledge so fast that Selma genuinely thought he had teleported. She stood trembling, beginning to understand that what she was witnessing wasn't just high-level combat. It was something that had never existed before. Orhan was rewriting what anyone thought magic could do, but blood began running from his nose as he dropped back to the ground. He knew exactly what was happening. His stats had been pushed far beyond what a human body could sustain. He charged at the dragon, weaving through its attacks, then launched himself upward for an overhead strike. The dragon anticipated it and swung its tail to knock him out of the air. Orhan didn't give it the satisfaction. He conjured a platform of condensed mana beneath his feet and used it to stand in midair. Logan watched with wide eyes and wondered if that was yet another original spell. It was. Orhan called it magic convergence, a technique that drew ambient mana from the surrounding environment and compressed it into a concentrated point. He had one more use for it, but first he rushed at the dragon again, layered a sharpness enhancement onto his sword, and struck at the neck. This time, the blade cut through. Logan and Sophia erupted in celebration, convinced it was over. Selma knew better. The dragon was hurt, but it wasn't finished, and Orhan was clearly reaching his limits, stumbling slightly as he tried to press the advantage before the creature could recover. She wanted to help, but she also knew that the combined strength of her entire clan's finest members had failed to land a single hit on this dragon. What exactly was she supposed to contribute? The dragon climbed back to its feet, breathed a wall of fire to push Orhan back, then summoned a torrent of dark magic around itself and unleashed a barrage of magical spears. Orhan used his speed to avoid most of them, darting between the projectiles as his mind drifted, just for a moment, to a distant memory. He remembered a time when everything had been simple. He and Oliver, running through the streets of their village without a single worry. Then one day, bandits came and burned everything to the ground. They had been completely helpless, unable to do anything but weep as the world around them turned to ash. The next morning, they buried everyone they could find. And, standing over those graves, the two of them made a vow to grow stronger every single day until they could protect the things they loved, so that nothing and no one could ever take from them again. He let that memory fuel him. He walked straight out of the dust cloud and back toward the dragon, unbowed, unyielding. The dragon began charging its most devastating attack, the one that had ended the lives of so many adventurers that it was spoken of like death given form. As the magical spears came screaming toward him, Orhan moved through them, bobbing, weaving, letting them miss by inches. He fired a fireball as a distraction and drove his blade toward the dragon's head. The scales hardened instantly into an impenetrable wall. The strike failed. He pulled back, absorbed another barrage behind a conjured barrier, and kept fighting. The dragon shifted its pattern and curved a spear around behind him, a shot that would have killed almost anyone else. Orhan's reflexes answered before his mind could, reflecting the spear away at the last possible moment. He pushed the attack relentlessly, refusing to give the dragon any space to redirect its attention toward the rookies. He thought briefly about how this fight would have looked with his full party. He pushed the thought aside. He had made a vow. He was going to become an adventurer who needed no one else to survive any dungeon, and this dragon was the proof. He planted a trap that kept the dragon under constant, relentless bombardment, and used the breathing room to channel his magic convergence directly into his sword. The blade turned pitch black as the energy built to its peak, the same concept as Oliver's ultimate technique, but entirely his own. He unleashed it. The strike sliced through the dragon's counterattack and drove straight into its chest. The impact was enormous. The dragon got back up. It went on the offensive immediately, forcing Orhan into a full retreat. His buffs were fading. He scraped together whatever mana he had left, boosted his stats one final time, and landed a strike powerful enough to knock the dragon out of the sky. The dragon hit the ground hard. Then it got up again. Orhan stood there breathing heavily, Zord broken in pieces at his feet. Both of them were running on fumes. He looked at the shattered blade, then made his decision. He was going to finish this, or die doing it. He summoned a concentrated rift of dark energy in front of him and drew all the ambient power around them into it, compressing it into a single razor-edged energy blade. He gripped it with both hands and launched himself at the dragon as it unleashed another volley of magical spears. He dodged, blocked, and reflected his way through the barrage, using one of his reflection platforms to launch himself off it at full speed, and drove the energy blade into the dragon's head with everything he had left. A massive explosion swallowed the cave in dust and light. When the dust settled, Selma found Orhan still standing, barely. He leaned heavily on the energy blade, breathing in ragged gasps, not yet fully aware of what he had just done. He had just become the first person in history to defeat the Black Dragon, and he had done it alone. Outside the dungeon, a massive crowd had gathered at the news of the Black Dragon. Luna and the rest of the heroes' party pushed through the onlookers, desperately hoping they had arrived in time to save whoever was still inside. Luna told the crowd to stand back, warning that the Black Dragon was loose, but the moment she broke through the front of the crowd, she stopped dead. The dragon was right there, directly in front of her. Oliver came up behind her and instinctively drew his sword. Luna told him to stand down and stay calm. Something was wrong with the creature. By the time the others caught up, it was unmistakable. The Black Dragon was already dead. The heroes' party stood in stunned silence, unable to even begin to figure out which party could have possibly taken down a monster like that. They didn't have to wonder for long. Luna spotted Orhan, barely upright, leaning his full weight on his sword, battered from head to toe. She wondered whether Orhan and the other adventurers trapped inside had somehow managed to defeat the beast together. She immediately told him he needed healing. Orhan told her to back off and just deal with the cleanup. Luna was left speechless, not knowing what she could possibly say to someone her party had thrown out. Her gaze then drifted to the adventurers who had entered the dungeon with Orhan, and not a single one of them had so much as a scratch. That was when it clicked. Orhan had defeated the Black Dragon alone. She could barely believe the thought, but there was no other explanation. As he walked past his former teammates, the tank demanded to know what had happened to the dragon. Orhan ignored him completely and kept walking. The tank screamed at him to answer. Luna told him to shut his mouth, making it clear that Orhan was obviously the one who had killed it. The tank turned his anger toward her and lunged at her, but she froze him in place with a single spell and would have made him regret it entirely if Oliver hadn't stepped in and ordered them both to stop. Oliver watched Orhan walk away, visibly furious that he had been completely outshone. Meanwhile, Sophia sat down to write a report on their 3-day expedition. But no matter how she tried to structure it, everything she wrote kept coming back to Orhan. She recalled how he had taught her the fundamentals of magic, how to be a better team player, and how he had then turned around and saved all their lives by defeating the legendary Black Dragon entirely by himself. Before she could finish, Selma walked in looking completely drained from the chaos of the day. She went straight for the bed and collapsed onto it. Sophia managed to get her to the bathhouse for some rest, and while they soaked, Selma admitted that she couldn't make sense of Orhan's fighting style. To her, he was incomprehensibly powerful, someone operating from depths she couldn't even measure herself against. Sophia offered a different perspective. She said that from where she was standing, it seemed like Orhan simply had such a thorough command of the fundamentals that he could do extraordinary things just by using his body and skills as efficiently as possible. She pointed out how Orhan had taught each of them how to fight according to their role, and then she had watched him apply every single one of those same principles to himself in real combat, except that he was simultaneously playing the role of the mage, the healer, the tank, and the swordsman all at once. Selma sat quietly for a moment, then thanked Sophia. It was exactly the insight she had needed. The next morning, Orhan woke up in considerable pain. His entire body was in revolt. He used a pain relief spell just to be able to get dressed and move around, though he made sure not to mention any of that to anyone. When Selma came to see him, they met downstairs at the diner and talked over black coffee. She asked how he was feeling. He told her he was fine. She then stood up, bowed deeply, and thanked him for saving her life, for protecting every one of the rookies, for making sure the expedition ended without a single casualty. Orhan told her it was a team effort and to think nothing of it. She then asked if he would accompany her to the guild house, as the clan leader wanted to speak with him. He agreed, having nothing better to do. At the guild house, the clan leader got straight to the point. He asked Orhan if he would join the Silver Rabbit clan as the lead attacker in their strongest party. On top of that, he offered him the rank of lieutenant, a position that would give him a hand in guiding the clan's day-to-day operations. Orhan was caught off guard. Lieutenant was a title typically reserved for the oldest and most foundational members of a clan. Almost anyone would have accepted on the spot. But Orhan wasn't almost anyone. He asked the leader for some time to think it over, and the leader granted it without hesitation. Walking back, Orhan turned the offer over in his mind, still struggling to believe that one of the finest clans in the world wanted him to lead their best party and serve as one of their officers. He decided to visit the old man who crafted his armor and ask for his perspective. Deep down, he was still afraid of being used and discarded the way his old teammates had done. The old man just laughed and told him to stop being so dramatic about everything. They talked for a while, but then a summons came in from the Adventurers Guild. An inquiry committee was being convened, and Orhan was expected to attend. He arrived to find the committee already seated. The guild master asked Orhan directly whether it was true that the Black Dragon had appeared on the 50th floor and that he had been forced to fight it alone. Orhan confirmed it. Then Dirk opened his mouth and claimed that their party had weakened the dragon first, causing it to flee, and that Orhan had merely landed the finishing blow and stolen the credit. He even added that Orhan should be grateful they had made him famous overnight. Orhan looked at him for a moment, then told him and the rest of them to close their mouths. Dirk shot to his feet in anger, but that was as far as it went. Luna told him to sit down, and he sat. Orhan then turned directly to Oliver and asked why he had taken his party straight to the 92nd floor immediately after bringing in a brand new enchanter. He asked whether Oliver had simply gotten too comfortable from having cleared that floor before. He reminded him that he had warned them repeatedly that they were barely getting through that level every time they faced it, and that he had wanted to grind through the lower floors more before pushing higher. He pointed out that there had been moments in past runs where they had come dangerously close to losing a party member, and that should have made it obvious that their luck was not infinite. Oliver responded with the same cold smugness he always carried. saying that the reason they had barely cleared that level before was because of Orhan's weakness, which was why they had brought in a proper enchanter. He claimed that with someone more capable, he had simply assumed they could push deeper. Orhan told him he wasn't even angry about being fired anymore. What genuinely infuriated him was that Oliver had never once respected what an enchanter actually did. Oliver replied that being an enchanter was easy. You stayed safely in the back and made sure the buffs stayed active. That did it. Orhan stood up and one by one laid out the exact timing at which each party member's buffs ran out. He explained that every person had a different buff duration, and the enchanter had to track all of them simultaneously, casting each one at precisely the right moment while also reading the flow of battle and calling out decisions in real time. Oliver said nothing. Outside, Selma sat alone in the garden, turning everything over in her mind. She would love to have someone like Orhan fighting alongside her, but she found herself wondering whether he would even want teammates after everything he had been put through. Beyond that, she questioned whether he even needed anyone at this point. He had just defeated the Black Dragon on his own. She remembered the moment during that fight when she had tried to send him some buffs, and he had told her not to, saying it would throw off his rhythm. The thought that she might only slow him down settled heavily on her. Before she could sink any further into it, Sophia, Logan, and Carol came sprinting toward her, asking where Orhan was because they wanted to talk to him about joining the clan. Selma sighed and said she wasn't sure Orhan needed a team. They would probably just weigh him down. Logan and the others said they already knew that. But the point wasn't to keep up with him right now. The point was to fight alongside him, grow stronger over time, and eventually reach a place where he would have to acknowledge them as real comrades. Selma hadn't thought of it that way. She realized the kids had a point. She could learn from him, too. She told them they could find him at the guild house, and they took off running immediately. At the guild house, Orhan had just stepped outside while the guild master was still deliberating on the penalty for what had happened. Heading out into the busy streets, he spotted Sophia and the others running straight toward him and immediately understood what they wanted. He ducked into a nearby alleyway and started running. They chased after him, shouting that they just wanted to talk. He managed to lose them by vaulting off a series of his magical platforms, then slipped inside the old man's shop to hide. The old man took one look at him and laughed, saying it appeared he was afraid of a bunch of kids. Orhan said he simply didn't want to hurt their feelings by telling them he wasn't ready to join any party yet. The old man told him quietly that he could see Orhan was still searching for somewhere to belong, and that he didn't have to do that alone. That night, Orhan climbed up to a cliff to clear his head and sit with the old man's words. He found Sophia already there. She told him it was her favorite spot. From there, the moon was always perfectly visible. She bowed and thanked him again for saving their lives. Then she asked him, simply and directly, to join the Silver Rabbits with them. She wanted to keep working alongside him. Orhan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked her what the guild meant to her. She thought about it, then told him that the guild had given her some of the best memories of her life. It was home. It was where she belonged. That was enough. He made his decision right then. The next morning, he went to the clan leader and told him he was accepting the offer. Selma appeared almost immediately. Apparently, she had been waiting somewhere nearby, and came forward to congratulate him, handing him the clan uniform. He stepped outside to find Sophia, Logan, and Carol sprinting toward him, completely out of breath, desperate to know whether it was true. Orhan simply smiled and told them he was looking forward to every adventure ahead. That night, Orhan dreamed of his childhood. He and Oliver were sparring while a group of trainers watched over them with sharp, calculating eyes, tracking every movement. Oliver was going all out, visibly tense and pushing hard against his best friend. Orhan, on the other hand, was holding back and paid for it when Oliver disarmed him. He hit the ground with a thud, smiled, and said Oliver was simply too strong for him to beat. Oliver snapped back that he knew perfectly well Orhan was stronger than that, and that Orhan used to beat him consistently not long ago. Orhan just replied that those days were behind him, and Oliver had surpassed him a long time ago. Oliver wasn't satisfied with that answer, but there was nothing he could do about it. He shot Orhan one last angry look and walked away without another word. Still lying on the ground, Orhan was approached by a silver-haired girl named Keon, a close friend of his. She asked if he was all right. He smiled, got up, and said he was fine, though a little embarrassed she had to witness that. She told him she thought he had fought with real heart and looked genuinely cool doing it. She also told him she already knew what he was capable of when he stopped holding back. Orhan replied quietly that he couldn't really do that anymore. His body couldn't handle it, and neither could his heart. Keon promised she would help him work through it someday. But just like that, her words faded from his memory. What exactly she had meant, the things they had shared, the promises they had made, and where she had eventually disappeared to, all of it slipped away into the dark. On the other side of the kingdom, however, Keon was very much alive. She now led a small party of 3 within a cult, and at that moment they were cutting through a coalition of 5 adventuring parties simply because those parties did not belong to their faction. When the last of them fell, a man in white robes appeared before her and delivered a message from the cult's leadership. Word had reached them that an unknown individual in the Northern Kingdom had defeated the Black Dragon entirely on his own. Sion was being ordered to travel there, find this person, and bring them into the fold. If they refused, she was to eliminate them on the spot. Kion thought about it briefly. It couldn't be Oliver. He was too well known to be described as an unknown figure. She had no idea who it might be, and frankly, it didn't concern her much. If they stood against the cult, she would deal with them without hesitation. Her party set off toward the Northern Kingdom. The pink-haired member of her group pointed out that the North was still under the Church's control, which meant they would need to be very careful. If they were discovered, there would be serious consequences. Sion agreed they needed to stay quiet and undercover. Still, something about this particular mission was unsettling her in a way she couldn't quite place, and she found herself hoping it would be resolved quickly. She didn't want to be anywhere near that part of the kingdom. The reason for that unease had a name. Sion had been in love with Orhan since childhood. She had been deceived into believing that the pressure placed on him by the Church's elders had driven him to end his own life. The day she received that news, something inside her froze completely. She thought about every promise they had ever made to each other, that they would always be together, that they would fight side by side no matter what. She had wept until there was nothing left, and when the grief turned cold, it became something else entirely. From that day forward, she devoted herself to the destruction of the Church and everyone connected to it. She never healed. She never moved on. She simply became something harder. Back in the Northern Kingdom, Orhan sat in a meeting with the senior members of the Silver Rabbit clan. The clan leader introduced him to the room, acknowledging that Orhan had been the driving force behind the expedition's success and the sole reason every single rookie and escort had come home alive. He announced that he was elevating Orhan to the rank of lieutenant in order to fill the position left vacant since the death of their beloved Albert, who had fallen fighting that very same dragon the previous year. He then asked if anyone had any objections. An older member spoke up. He had no issue with Orhan's strength, but he asked directly whether Orhan understood what accepting this rank truly meant. Once he became a lieutenant, he would be responsible not only for his own life, but for the lives of everyone under him. Many of the clan's members had nothing else in the world outside of the clan itself. It was their entire existence. A lieutenant was expected to always prioritize the clan's well-being, even at personal cost. Memories of Keon and the promises he had made long ago came flooding back. He knew he couldn't pour his entire self into any single institution, so he answered honestly. He told the old man that, unlike many of them, he had a life outside the clan, and that meant he couldn't offer everything to it. The room went still. Even Selma hadn't seen that coming. The old man erupted, saying that statement alone made Orhan unfit to be a clan member, let alone a lieutenant, and demanded to know why he was even there. Orhan replied simply that he was there because he would protect every person he cared about, and that was his commitment. Selma understood in that moment that Orhan didn't care about the clan as an institution. He cared about the people inside it. The old man pushed back further, so Orhan made it plain. He would do everything in his power to protect his comrades, and that was the full extent of what he could promise. Nothing beyond that. The old man finally backed down. The leader called a vote. It wasn't close. Orhan became a lieutenant of the Silver Rabbit clan. Selma walked him through the corridor toward the first unit he would be joining. Before they could get there, a girl called out from behind them and told Selma she wanted a word with the new lieutenant. Selma introduced her as Stella from the management division. Stella asked Orhan whether he was good at teaching and said there was a newer party she would like him to work with. Selma thought it sounded like a reasonable idea. Orhan asked whether it would interfere with his duties in Unit 1. Selma told him not to worry. He would have far more free time in this clan than he ever had with the Heroes Party. Stella said she would send him the relevant materials and rushed off. Selma then led him to a room where he met the members of the first unit for the first time. They gathered around a table and introduced themselves one by one. The blue-haired girl went first. Her name was Rain, and she was the party's mage. Orhan noticed that despite being the oldest member present, she didn't carry herself with much confidence. Rain picked up on the observation and grew visibly self-conscious. The blonde girl jumped in next, introducing herself as Otis, the party's healer. The last member was a tall, silver-haired young man named Will, who served as the group's defensive tank. Finally, Orhan turned to Selma, who introduced herself formally as the enchanter and the leader of the unit. Orhan looked around the table and understood. These were going to be his comrades, people who would stand and fight alongside him. He stood and introduced himself as Orhan, the party's new frontline attacker. Will smiled, noting that ever since Albert's passing, he had been covering that role despite not being suited for it. Selma told everyone to relax and stop being so stiff about the whole thing. Before Orhan could even sit back down, Will asked him directly how he had killed the Black Dragon. Selma noticed that the question made Orhan slightly uncomfortable and told him he didn't have to answer if he didn't want to. Orhan said he should share it. They were his party now, and being on the same page mattered. He explained that the main reason he had been able to handle the dragon alone came down to 2 original spells he had developed himself. Rain's eyes went wide at the mention of original spells. He continued, explaining that the first spell was called Impact, which could amplify the effect of any piece of equipment or magical attack by 100 times. The second was a stackable buff spell that could be layered repeatedly to compound the power of any support magic. He revealed that during the dragon fight, he had stacked his own buffs 32 times. Rain and Otis were visibly stunned, immediately pointing out that a spell like that would give him an overwhelming advantage against virtually any opponent. Orhan added the caveat. It could only be used on himself, and the physical toll it placed on the user was severe. He couldn't sustain it for long. The dragon fight had already gone on longer than he would have liked, and by the end he had been in genuinely bad shape. Otis asked that if he was that powerful, surely he could fill any role in a party. Orhan said there was actually one significant limitation. No matter how hard he tried, he could only cast mid-ranked magic. He couldn't access advanced spells. The whole table reacted with visible confusion. Selma asked how that was even possible when he clearly understood magic deeply enough to invent entirely new spells. Orhan looked down and admitted that he didn't have a clear answer for it himself. What he did know was that his original spells more than compensated for that gap. Selma mentioned that she wanted to take the unit down to the dungeon soon so they could start building chemistry and working as an actual team. Orhan said that before any of that could happen, he needed a sword. Rain seemed surprised he hadn't already sorted that out, pointing out that a custom weapon typically took several days to forge. Orhan said it wasn't an issue. He just used standard off-the-shelf swords and could walk into any shop to replace one. The entire party stared at him. Veteran adventurers didn't use stock weapons. Even junior rookies eventually moved past those. The fact that the man who had just slain the Black Dragon was carrying a mass-produced blade was almost too much for them to process. They immediately dragged him to the clan's blacksmith. The blacksmith took one look at Orhan and said that someone of his caliber deserved a weapon forged from materials found in the deepest dungeon layers. Orhan told him not to go overboard and reached into his belongings, pulling out a collection of artifacts he had gathered from the deep floors, including a scale from the Black Dragon itself. The entire party fell silent. Orhan realized immediately that he had made a mistake. He had forgotten that these people had faced that same dragon and that it had taken someone they deeply cared about from them. He began to apologize. Rain was the first to recover. She looked at the scale and then quietly told Orhan that a sword forged from the hide of the Black Dragon would be worthy of the man who had defeated it. A couple of days passed, and one morning Selma called a team meeting to go over a newly assigned quest. Everyone took their seats, but the feeling of being back in a party again still felt strange to Orhan. It had been so long since he had chosen to go solo that he had completely forgotten what this was like. Selma opened the meeting by revealing that the Adventure Management Division had assigned them the task of collecting noxious sheep pelts, and they would be heading to the 86th floor to carry it out, which would also serve as a chance to practice their teamwork with Orhan in the mix. Orhan quietly promised himself that he would make sure this party pushed past the 94th floor one day so they could stand proudly on equal footing with the hero's party. They entered the 86th floor a short while later. It was part of the lower dungeon levels, but the scenery was strikingly beautiful, lush, and calm. Selma reminded everyone not to get distracted, pointing out that earth dragons were common on this floor and were not to be underestimated. Their primary objective, however, was to get a feel for working with Orhan as a unit. She laid out the roles clearly. Will would hold the monster's attention for as long as possible. Rain would attack from the rear with her explosive magic. Otis would join in the assault while keeping her healing spells ready at a moment's notice. Selma herself would maintain everyone's buffs and handle all commanding decisions. And Orhan would serve as their ace, the frontline attacker responsible for dealing the majority of the damage. Otis remarked that Orhan was probably strong enough to handle every monster on the floor by himself. Will agreed, wondering aloud whether the rest of them would just end up getting in his way. Selma turned to Orhan and said that if he felt he would genuinely be more effective fighting alone, she had no objection. Orhan replied immediately that he was part of this team and would follow her orders. Selma recognized she had made a foolish suggestion and was about to say so when a massive fireball came screaming toward them out of nowhere. Orhan moved instantly, dodging the blast and simultaneously throwing up a defensive wall to cover the entire team. He scanned the area and determined it was the work of an earth dragon, but couldn't see one anywhere. It was hiding. Otis stepped forward and told him to leave the tracking to her. She possessed a special ability called magic tracking, which allowed her to pinpoint the location of hidden enemies by reading the magical residue left behind in an area that had been attacked. She swept the surroundings and quickly identified the dragon concealing itself behind a cluster of bushes. She fired a flare-type ability to draw it out into the open, and Will immediately got into position. The monster charged toward them and Will went straight at it. Selma watched with quiet satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of teamwork she wanted Orhan to see. Will closed the gap while Rain began charging her attack behind him. The dragon fired a fireball. Will sliced straight through it without breaking stride. The dragon followed up with several more blasts, but Will either cut them apart or evaded them entirely. Once he had baited the dragon into exactly the right position, he fell back, and Rain triggered one of her trap cards, detonating a full explosion spell directly on top of the creature. The dragon was finished in moments. Orhan was impressed. He had expected competence, but not this level of polish. He took a closer look at Will and his lance and realized that Will hadn't just been deflecting the fireballs, he had been nullifying the magic inside them entirely, canceling the spells at their core, and Rain had unleashed a high-grade explosive skill with a speed and fluidity that would have taken most casters twice as long to pull off. Otis's tracking ability effectively removed the possibility of anyone getting blindsided, and Selma was the one holding it all together, binding every moving piece into a single, well-oiled unit. He told Selma directly that he was genuinely impressed by every member of the team. She flushed slightly, but before she could respond, a loud roar erupted behind them. 2 more earth dragons had woken up and were ready to fight. Selma said this was exactly the kind of opportunity they needed to keep practicing. Orhan and Will launched themselves at the dragons simultaneously. Midway through his charge, Orhan stopped and turned around. Something felt wrong. He fired a rock arrow into what appeared to be empty space. His instinct was right. A heavily armored turtle monster had been slowly closing in on Selma and the others from behind, preparing to ambush them. His intervention stopped it cold. The problem was that they were now caught between 2 earth dragons in front and the armored turtle behind. Selma took charge without hesitation. She assessed that the turtle had an exceptionally strong shell but moved extremely slowly, making it an ideal target for spellcasters. She directed Rain and Otis to handle the turtle while she ordered Orhan and Will to focus entirely on the earth dragons without concern for anything behind them. Orhan found himself genuinely enjoying this. Selma's calls were sharp and decisive, exactly the kind of leadership that made someone worth following. The dragons charged, hurling fireballs as they came. Will positioned himself between them and Orhan, acting as an immovable wall, cutting through every fireball and keeping the dragon's attention fully on himself. Orhan circled wide to flank them from the side for a better angle. He layered his magical buffs onto himself, sharpening his blade and amplifying his strength, then waited for the signal. Selma told him to hold for 5 seconds, let the dragons overextend, and then strike simultaneously with Will. He held. Will baited an attack and jumped back at the right moment, and Orhan unleashed his air cutter, slicing through both dragons cleanly and putting them down in a single sweep. At the same time, Rain and Otis worked through the turtle in sequence, a lightning strike first, followed by a fire blast, then an ice field that shattered what was left of it. Another clean win. As they moved through the fields afterward, Orhan mentioned that it had been a long time since a fight had felt this effortless. He usually had to shoulder so much more by himself. Selma paused and asked him seriously, in his honest assessment, did he think they were ready to take on Floor 92? Orhan told her they were more than ready for it, and added that he believed they had the ability to defeat the Black Dragon even without him, if they kept their composure. Selma wasn't as quick to agree. She had faced that dragon recently during the teaching expedition, and she knew exactly how terrifying it was. She didn't want to lose anyone to it. By the time the sun began to set, the mission was done. They had collected more than enough noxious sheep pelts to mark it a complete success. Orhan asked Selma if she could point him toward the Adventure Management Office, since they had called for him. She told him not to worry about finding it alone. She needed to report the mission's completion anyway, and would go with him. He thanked her, and that evening the entire team gathered at a pub to eat, celebrate, and talk through the day. A couple of drinks later, things took a turn. Selma got drunk and began directing her attention very openly at Orhan. He could feel himself starting to lose his own resolve and knew he needed to do something before the situation got out of hand. Before he could act, Rain appeared beside him, latched onto his arm, and pressed herself close. Will watched the whole scene from across the table with great enthusiasm, loudly congratulating Orhan on his apparent success. Orhan decided he had seen enough. The moment a window opened, he used his sleep magic on both women and sent them into a deep, peaceful slumber. Later that evening, Sophia was relaxing in her room waiting for Selma to come home when she heard a knock at the door. She assumed it was her sister. It was Orhan's voice instead. Slightly flustered, she wasn't dressed for company. She hesitated, but he told her Selma was with him and asked her to let them in. She opened the door and immediately understood the situation. Selma was draped across Orhan's back like a sack, which looked considerably worse than any walk of shame Sophia had ever witnessed. She told her sister to get off Orhan's back immediately. She also noticed that Orhan had come in smiling, which only made her feel more conflicted. She had feelings for him, that much she couldn't deny, and watching this play out in front of her stung in a way she didn't quite know how to manage. After things settled, Sophia quietly told Selma that she was probably making Orhan uncomfortable. Selma apologized and disappeared into the bathroom for a shower. Standing under the hot water, she thought about the way Sophia looked at Orhan and recognized it immediately for for what it was. Orhan was clearly Sophia's first love, and she had no intention of getting in the way of that. But then she started replaying her own behavior from the evening, and the memory of calling him handsome floated to the surface. She began to spiral. She asked herself honestly whether she simply admired Orhan as a person and respected him as an adventurer, or whether something deeper was growing there, something that could quietly complicate everything between her and her sister as time went on. The next morning, Selma accompanied Orhan to the management reception where they found Stella waiting for them. Her desk was an absolute disaster, but she didn't seem to notice or care and carried on with her day regardless. She introduced Orhan to Carla, the woman responsible for overseeing the newer adventures in the clan. Carla greeted him warmly and told him he would be taking over the training of Group Number 10 going forward. She asked whether he had gone through their files. Orhan replied that he already knew them personally, but had reviewed the files carefully before committing to the decision. Carla looked visibly relieved and thanked him for taking them on. Stella added that at this point, Orhan was probably the only person who could handle that particular group. Orhan smiled and asked what the training policy was and how hard he was allowed to push them. Stella told him there was no formal policy. He was free to train them however he saw fit, drawing from his own experience. The goal was simply to prepare them well enough that they could operate independently in the outside world without getting into serious trouble. Orhan looked a little uncertain about the open-ended direction, and Selma understood him well enough to suggest that having a concrete target to work toward would probably help him more than a vague objective. Stella thought about it and replied that Orhan should aim to get the group capable of independently handling the middle-level dungeon floors within 6 months. Orhan remarked that those were high expectations for rookies. Stella replied that this particular group were both the biggest troublemakers and the most talented of the entire intake, so high expectations were appropriate. She also noted that they had already shown considerable growth during the teaching expedition. Orhan agreed to give it his best, and the two of them left the room to get back to their respective work. In the corridor, Selma stopped suddenly and mentioned that if Orhan had read all the files, he now knew everything about both Sophia and herself. Orhan looked slightly uncomfortable and gave a small nod. A quiet sadness crossed Selma's face as she explained. Sophia was the daughter of a maid who had also been their father's mistress. Things might have been manageable, but Sophia's mother passed away just a couple of years after giving birth to her. The family took Sophia in, but as the illegitimate child of a low-born woman, she never truly belonged. She was treated as an outsider from the very beginning. It became even harder when Selma left home to become an adventurer. When she returned for the first time, she found Sophia with empty eyes and a hollow expression, the kind that comes from two adults making careless decisions while a child quietly absorbs all the damage. Selma couldn't bear it. The next time she left, she took Sophia with her. From that day forward, she treated her as a true sister in every sense of the word. She looked at Orhan and told him plainly that Sophia was the only thing in this world she truly loved, and she wanted to see her grow into a confident and capable adventurer no matter what it took. Orhan promised to take care of her. He bid Selma goodbye and walked into the training room where all 3 members of Group 10 were already waiting for him with barely contained excitement. They immediately crowded around him with enthusiastic greetings. He settled them down and sat in front of them, telling them that he had been given the responsibility of training them from this point on. All 3 were visibly delighted. Carol declared that he was incredibly strong and could do anything. Orhan replied that he still had a great deal to learn himself. Sophia immediately cut him off, pointing out that he had defeated the Black Dragon completely on his own. So Carol was right. Orhan smiled quietly. He thought about how close that fight had actually come to going the other way, but pushed the thought aside and simply thanked them, telling them that one day they would have to face challenges just as serious. So they needed to train with everything they had before that day arrived. He gave them a short but sincere pep talk, telling each of them that they had real potential waiting to be developed and that he genuinely believed they could one day clear dungeons entirely on their own terms. The group lit up with energy and thanked him for taking them on. Orhan smiled and moved into the first lesson. He told them there were 2 things he wanted them to keep in mind at all times. The first was to stay mentally flexible. Plans would fall apart, and when they did, they needed to be able to adapt on the spot and find a way through regardless. The second was to think for themselves, because not everything he told them would be right. He admitted openly that he had made plenty of mistakes in his own time, and that wearing the title of teacher didn't make him automatically correct. With that foundation laid, he asked each of them to share why they had chosen to become adventurers. He started with Sophia. She looked a little embarrassed at first, but then said honestly that she wanted to be like Selma, to become a capable adventurer who could make her own decisions without fear of anyone. Orhan promised to help her get there. He then turned to Logan. Logan answered without any hesitation. He was doing it for money. The girls reacted with visible surprise. Orhan told him to continue. Logan explained that he came from a very poor village where simply putting food on the table was a daily struggle, and people fought constantly just to survive. Despite all of that, the villagers had pooled what little they had and sent him to the city so that his talent wouldn't go to waste in a place that couldn't support it. That was why he was determined to become a successful adventurer, to pay every single one of them back for what they had sacrificed. He admitted that he had arrived in the city thinking he was already a strong fighter, but the moment he came face to face with the Black Dragon and witnessed what a truly elite adventurer looked like, he understood how far he still had to go. Orhan told him he would teach him everything he could, but Logan would have to match that effort on his end if he wanted to repay his village the way it deserved. He then turned to Carol and asked about her motivation. She replied simply that she didn't really have one. She fought because she could kill monsters, and that made people happy, and she liked seeing smiles on people's faces. Orhan looked at her carefully. He could see that the grief and anger buried inside her ran very deep, even as she tried to cover everything with lightness. She added that monsters took smiles away from people, so she got rid of the monsters. Orhan decided not to press her further and moved on, asking all three of them to hold on to their individual reasons as they trained, to let those reasons fuel them when things got hard. Sophia then asked Orhan why he had become an adventurer. He thought about everything he had gone through as a child and replied that he wanted to grow strong enough that the things and people he cared about could never be taken from him again, no matter what. He then told them plainly that he wasn't going to treat them like children, and he expected them to give him everything they had in return. The very next morning, training began in the lower-level dungeons. They came across a pack of wolf monsters, and Carol charged straight in without hesitation, cutting down two of them immediately with her daggers before moving on to the next. Orhan watched, thinking about the core problem with her approach. She was a defender, and her actual job was to draw enemy attention and protect her teammates, not to chase kills like an attacker. Sure enough, she left herself completely exposed from behind. Orhan had already anticipated it. He conjured a shield wall to intercept the wolf closing in on her blind side, then stepped in and took its head off. He asked Carol directly why she had left her back completely unguarded. She smiled and said it didn't really matter to her. Then, to his shock, she brought her dagger up and sliced open her own wrist. Orhan moved immediately to stop the bleeding, and then stared as the wound sealed itself shut on its own. He had never seen anything like it. Carol told him calmly that she couldn't really be killed. Her body healed itself automatically. She was completely accustomed to pain, and that was why she had never bothered focusing on defense. Orhan thought about what he knew of her history. Carol had been taken from her home by a criminal organization operating under the guise of a church. Because of her regenerative abilities, she had been subjected to all manner of experiments. The organization's singular obsession was the resurrection of an ancient overlord, and it had grown into the largest crime syndicate on the continent. Carol had been rescued 2 years prior by the first unit of the Silver Rabbit clan, the unit that had included Albert. She had been deeply unstable when they found her, but gradually she had steadied herself and chosen to become an adventurer on her own terms. Albert's death had hit her harder than she ever let on. Orhan tried to reach her. He told her gently that every time she got hurt, both he and the rest of the team felt it, and their smiles disappeared right along with it. That got through to her in a way nothing else had. She dropped her daggers and broke down crying, promising she would never do anything like that again. Orhan reached out to put a hand on her shoulder and she flinched away hard, begging him not to hit her. The weight of that reaction settled heavily on him. He understood in that moment just how deep her trauma ran. He stepped forward and pulled her into a firm hug. She went still, confused by it. He told her quietly that as long as he was around, no one was going to hurt her. She had nothing to worry about anymore. The next morning, real training began. Orhan worked with Carol on dodging rather than absorbing hits, teaching her to use her speed and instincts defensively rather than purely offensively. Logan was given a spear to work with, pushing him toward becoming a more adaptable and well-rounded member of the group. Sophia was tasked with counting backwards from 500 while simultaneously hitting targets with 3 different spells at once. The same training circuit repeated over the following days, and eventually Will took over Logan's spear training. He was better with the weapon than Orhan anyway, which freed Orhan to focus his full attention on Carol and Sophia, both of whom were improving noticeably with each session. When Orhan finally felt satisfied with where they had reached, he called them together and told them they had all cleared the basic training phase and were ready to move on to the next level, which would be harder, but which he had full confidence they could handle. The group celebrated loudly. Then, Rain stepped into the training room and told Orhan it was time to head out. The blacksmith had finished his sword. Orhan headed excitedly to the blacksmith, who handed over the finished sword. The moment it settled into his grip, it felt like it had been made specifically for him. The angle, the weight, the feel, all of it perfect. He made a quiet promise to himself that with this blade, he would make sure none of his comrades ever got hurt again. He had no idea what was waiting just around the corner. The sword was lighter than anything he had used before, yet looked dangerously sharp. Rain remarked that in the entire kingdom, no one else possessed a weapon like it. Orhan silently reaffirmed his promise. No matter the situation, he would protect the people close to him. The very next morning, Orhan and his party descended into the dungeon and pushed all the way down to the 91st floor. There they encountered the undead king, but the monster was no match for Orhan and his new sword. He cut it clean in half with a single strike, then stared at the blade for a moment, genuinely impressed by what it could do. The rest of the party congratulated him on taking the monster down single-handedly, which meant the 91st floor was cleared and the path to the next one was open. Selma asked how the new sword felt. Orhan said it felt like a natural extension of his hand. Will noted that the Silver Rabbit clan had some of the finest blacksmiths in the business, and Orhan had to agree. He had never seen craftsmanship like it. Selma added that the materials mattered just as much as the skill, and since Orhan had used black dragon scales as the core material, the resulting weapon was naturally going to be among the rarest and finest in the entire realm. After the brief celebration, Selma told them all it was time to head back to the guild. Clearing the 91st floor meant their next destination was the 92nd, the floor where Albert had lost his life to the Black Dragon. She promised that this time, they would finish it. By the time they emerged from the dungeon, the sun was nearly setting. That evening, as Otis was talking about wanting food and a long bath, Selma pulled Orhan aside and asked for a private word. He tensed slightly, wondering if something was wrong. She quickly clarified that it was nothing serious. She just wanted to talk through their plan for the next floor. Orhan apologized and told her he couldn't that evening, as he had already promised Sophia's group that he would take them on a dungeon run in the morning and intended to keep that commitment. Selma seemed a little surprised, asking whether he should be resting given that they were also heading to the 92nd floor in a couple of days. Orhan told her not to worry. He was going purely as an instructor, and all the fighting would be handled by the rookies. He mentioned that they had been developing well and he expected them to be able to clear the 29th floor entirely on their own. He would simply be there as a precaution. Selma thought quietly about how fast time had moved. Not long ago, Sophia had been a fresh recruit who could barely control her own magic, and now she was on the verge of reaching floor 30, after which she would be considered a fully qualified adventurer and sent on independent missions without supervision. That night, Orhan visited the old man at his shop and sat down for some tea. The old man looked troubled. He told Orhan he had been hearing some unsettling rumors lately. Word going around that the criminal organization Armenthrop had resurfaced and was back to its old reputation as an adventure killer. The reports were coming from the southern dungeons, but the news was not good. Orhan understood the weight of it immediately. There were two major criminal organizations in this world, Armenthrop and the Church. Armenthrop operated under the belief that dungeons were something ancient and sacred that humans had no right to disturb, and they enforced that belief with extreme violence. Meanwhile, the rest of his unit was quietly preparing themselves in their own way for what lay ahead on the 92nd floor. Rain sat alone in her room. moonlight spilling through the window, holding the robe Albert had worn the day he died fighting the Black Dragon. She spoke to him quietly, telling him to watch from wherever he was, because they were coming to finish what he had started. Will had gone to the blacksmith to collect a custom spear he had ordered and thanked the craftsman for another exceptional job, saying that with this weapon he intended to claim the revenge they had all been waiting for. The blacksmith smiled and told Will he had grown enormously since the previous year. Will's expression turned heavy. He said Albert had died because he hadn't been strong enough, that it should have been him who fell that day, not the man who was the heart of their clan, who had given his life protecting the rest of them. Otis sat by a fountain under the silver glow of the moon, turning the past year over in her mind. Everything they had endured, how much stronger they had all become. But she still found herself asking whether that would truly be enough against something that had already taken so many lives. She made herself a quiet promise. This time, she wasn't going to let anyone die. They were all coming home. Selma stood at her window in her room, completely lost in her own thoughts. Sophia found her there and asked if she was worried about facing the dragon again. She admitted that she didn't want Selma going anywhere near it. Even when Orhan had defeated it, he had come out of the fight in terrible shape, and no one could know for certain how things would unfold in a second encounter. Selma replied that it had been over a year since Albert's death, and she believed the party had grown strong enough to avenge him. Sophia stepped forward and hugged her, telling her she believed in her and her team and that everything was going to be all right. The next morning, Orhan took the young party into the dungeon, and they cleared the 29th floor without any significant trouble. He smiled at them and told them they had all grown considerably as adventurers, and that clearing the 30th floor would mark their official graduation from new recruits to fully qualified adventurers. Everyone was happy until Sophia realized that once they became full adventurers, they would be assigned to a unit, which meant Orhan would no longer be their instructor. The thought quietly dampened her mood, but she pushed it aside and headed back to the guild with the others. They submitted their report to the receptionist, who informed them that they would need to pass one final test, clearing floor 30 entirely on their own, with a senior adventurer from Unit 2 observing to confirm they were ready to operate independently. The test could be arranged in 2 days. The group exchanged glances and realized that in 2 days, Orhan's party was scheduled to descend to the 92nd floor. They had wanted Orhan present for their test and asked the receptionist if the date could be shifted. She replied that given how packed everyone's schedules were, rescheduling the test could push it back considerably. Orhan stepped in and offered to speak to Selma about postponing the trip to the 92nd floor by a few days. Sophia immediately stopped him. She said the others had been waiting for that day for over a year, and it would be cruel to delay it any further on their account. The three of them told Orhan to let them handle the dungeon themselves, with Carol adding that she would keep her reckless tendencies in check this time. Orhan had no real argument left. He agreed. Before he stepped back entirely, he asked to review their floor plan to make sure their thinking was sound. He went through it carefully and told them the approach looked solid overall, but reminded them to stay flexible. Things rarely went exactly as planned. He then handed each of them a small pendant as a good luck charm and wished them well. The days leading up to both tests passed quickly, with each party preparing in their own way. When the day finally, at the same time, Orhan and his party reached the 92nd floor and entered the dragon's chamber. The creature woke immediately. Selma moved fast, buffing all her teammates in rapid succession. Orhan used his original spell to multiply his own stats 4 times over. The fight opened hard. Will drove his lance through the dragon's tail and Orhan came straight after, severing it completely. The rest of the unit continued pouring in support magic to keep the pressure on. Back on floor 30, Sophia's group reached the boss room and found 4 other adventurers already waiting at the entrance. They were from the church. One of them used a mind-reading ability on Logan, and the moment he realized these rookies were connected to the Dragon Slayer, something shifted in his expression. Their supervisor stepped in between with a drawn sword, sensing the danger immediately. In one effortless motion, the man's head was removed. The rookies froze in horror. The largest of the church members raised a hand and used earth magic to seal off every exit. Carol didn't hesitate. She rushed at him to buy the others time and was launched straight into a wall for it. Back on the 92nd floor, Orhan felt the pendants he had given the rookies activate, the emergency signal he had built into them. He told Selma immediately that the rookies were in serious danger, but they couldn't leave the floor, not with the dragon still in the fight. And the dragon, sensing the shift in focus, had already begun to recover, regrowing its severed tail and one of the wings Orhan had destroyed, undoing everything they had worked for. Orhan stood with his back against the wall, caught between two. Back at the other location, the muscle-headed brute was closing in on Sophia and the others. But Sophia was so consumed with worry about Carol that she couldn't focus on the threat directly in front of her. Logan snapped her back to attention, telling her they needed to fight. Carol would heal up and be fine. That was just how she worked. He reminded her that their teacher never gave up on a fight no matter how badly things looked, and neither should they. He told her that Orhan always said an adventurer's first priority was to make it home alive, and that was exactly what they were going to fight for. The pep talk worked. Sophia steadied herself, and Logan cast buffs on both of them. Sophia fired a thunderbolt at the brute, but he blocked it effortlessly and canceled it out with his sword. Sophia panicked. Logan told her to run. The brute gave chase, but Logan kept his eyes sharp, and the moment an opening appeared, he used earth magic to trap him, the same technique he had learned directly from Orhan. He told the brute that his movements were painfully predictable, and he should have spent less time at the gym and more time sharpening his mind. He moved in to finish it, but the brute grabbed his weapon and shattered the earth trap with raw strength, then drove Logan into the ground. He told him plainly that overconfidence at his level was a dangerous habit, and that he should have just run when he had the chance. Sophia's panic surged as she wondered if this was how it ended for them. Logan reminded the brute that he had planned to use them as bait. The captain confirmed that they only needed one, and that was the signal. The brute raised his heavy sword and brought it down toward Logan. Sophia's fear peaked. She dropped her weapon and screamed. Then the brute's body locked up completely. He couldn't move. It was Sophia. Something inside her had awakened, a hidden ability she hadn't known she possessed. She used it to hurl the brute violently into the wall, then rushed to Logan's side to heal him. The impact wasn't enough to keep the brute down for long, though, and he climbed back to his feet, ready for more. This time, Logan and Sophia threw everything they had at him, fighting purely to survive. Back on the 92nd floor, the enraged dragon conjured blades from its own magical energy and launched them at the group. Orhan realized there was only one option left, a powerful but incomplete spell he had been holding in reserve. He activated it through his bracelet, coating his sword in pure darkness, then charged forward and drove the blade into the dragon's leg with full force. A blinding flash lit up the chamber. The dragon crashed to the ground, and Selma stared in disbelief. He had been carrying something that powerful this entire time, but even that wasn't enough. The dragon's regeneration kicked in immediately. The panic in the group was visible. Orhan told them plainly the only way to win was to deliver one decisive strike before the healing factor could respond. There was no other path. The dragon swung its tail. Selma threw up a barrier to cover everyone. It held through 3 strikes before shattering, and Selma was thrown hard into the wall. Orhan had used that time to position himself high up directly behind the dragon. He channeled every remaining drop of magic into his sword, reshaping it into a spear, and launched himself at the creature. The dragon sensed him and turned. Orhan didn't slow down for a second. He drove the spear straight into the dragon's forehead with everything he had, declaring that he would not let his friend's hopes be crushed. The energy from the strike ripped through the dragon's body, fracturing and splintering it from the inside until the overload caused it to explode completely. The dragon was finished for good. Selma felt the tension leave her body all at once, and then her consciousness slipped away. Meanwhile, Logan and Sophia were still holding on against the brute. He slammed Logan into the ground again and turned his full attention towards Sophia. She could feel that her ability had run dry. She couldn't summon it a second time. The captain told the brute to finish her before she became a future problem. Sophia stood completely defenseless, silently wishing for Orhan to somehow appear. The brute swung his sword down at her, and 2 aerial slashes struck him from out of nowhere, smashing him into the wall behind him. The room went silent. Sophia turned around. Orhan was standing there. She burst into tears the moment she saw him, and he crossed the room quickly and pulled her into a hug, apologizing for being late and telling her she had done incredibly well to hold on this long. He used teleportation magic to bring Logan and Carol to his side, then told them it was over. He would handle the rest. He conjured a barrier around all three of them and promised the fight wouldn't take long. He turned to the remaining adventurers and asked why they had hurt his students. The priestess answered calmly. They had needed bait to draw out the dragon slayer, and it had worked. Orhan drew his sword. They warned him that they specialized in fighting other humans, and that he was now facing three of them at once. That didn't give him a moment's pause. The moment he extended his hand, the priestess recognized what was coming and jumped clear. Her teammates weren't as quick. They were caught in Orhan's gravity spell, their bodies suddenly too heavy to stand. He followed up with a thunder attack that dropped them both instantly. Only the priestess remained. She blocked his sword strike cleanly and remarked that she hadn't expected him to take her teammates out so efficiently. He told her to focus on her own situation. She answered with a blizzard. He tried to process how someone her size could parry his blade and then release a high-grade spell that fast. She followed it up with a thunder rain spell, and he barely managed to block it, which visibly worried his students. He couldn't figure out how she was casting multiple special rank spells in such rapid succession, as though she was bypassing all the usual casting steps entirely. The priestess expressed genuine surprise that he had survived and mentioned that they had been hoping someone of his strength might join their side. Orhan told her he had no interest in fighting alongside murderers. She looked at him for a moment and told him he reminded her of someone she had lost when she was young, and that if he had lived, he would have turned out exactly like him. Orhan had no patience for it. He asked her directly why she was killing adventurers. She replied that it wasn't her preference, but the original had been defeated and the replica had fallen into enemy hands. She was simply buying time until that could be resolved. None of it made any sense to him. He told her that if she was killing people to stall, she should stop. That sent her over the edge. She snapped, telling him to be quiet because people like him were dragging the world toward its own destruction. The words hit Orhan hard enough to give him pause, but she was done talking. She hurled an exploding fireball at him. He dodged it, only to discover she could launch several simultaneously. He was forced into a full retreat, but she eventually landed a hit. She stood over the smoke, certain no one could have survived that barrage, and quietly apologized to him, telling him his sacrifice was a necessary cost. Then Orhan emerged from the smoke, having converted his sword into a shield at the last moment. He immediately reshaped it into a whip and snared the priestess, telling her he had deliberately waited for her to believe she had won, because that was the moment she would let her guard down. She tried to force her way free, but he pulled the whip tighter. Then her hood fell away, and the silver hair beneath it stopped him cold. The recognition went both ways. Both of them stood there in silence, staring at each other. Then she started laughing, telling him this must be the work of the old man and the woman who had been toying with her life. Orhan was thoroughly confused. She told him there was no reason to keep fighting and asked sweetly to be released, promising she would leave and take her teammates with her. He didn't fully trust her, but his magic ran out at that exact moment, freeing her anyway. Her teammates stirred and began to recover, and Orhan's situation suddenly looked worse. Then his friends stepped forward to stand beside him. The priestess looked at the assembled group and told them she was done for the day. She promised to leave Orhan and everyone with him alone, and then vanished along with her companions. Orhan stood there still processing what had just happened. His students were safe. That was what mattered most right now. Everyone thanked him, and Logan asked quietly whether he had known the girl who had attacked them. Orhan looked down and said he didn't know her, not anymore. At the same time, in her own sanctuary, the priestess sat with the realization that Orhan was alive, and she was overwhelmed by it. She didn't like that he was an adventurer, which put them on opposite sides, and she blamed the woman who had spent years manipulating her for everything. She had been told Orhan was dead. Now that she knew the truth, she was determined to make that woman pay, and to reclaim every year she had lost that she could have spent with her childhood friend. Elsewhere, Oliver had been pushing himself through intense training ever since he heard what Orhan had done to the Black Dragon. Billy found him there and struck up a conversation, asking if he was training to beat the dragon or to compete with Orhan. He replied that he was training because his own weakness shamed him. She mentioned that no one had ever slain the Black Dragon before, and that people across the kingdom were already calling Orhan the new hero. Oliver wasn't driven by jealousy, but when Philly mentioned that a combat tournament was coming up, something ignited in him. He declared that he would defeat Orhan in that tournament and show everyone who the real hero was. A few days later, Orhan gathered his students. He told them plainly that their last exam had not gone the way it should have, and that the responsibility for that sat with him. He hadn't been able to reach them in time. They immediately disagreed. They told him they were only alive because of him, and that without his arrival, they would all be dead. Orhan said that was being generous. What had saved them that day was luck more than anything else, and if the fight had continued any longer, the outcome for everyone, including his own party, would have been far worse. He admitted that he had considered himself strong, until fighting the priestess showed him that he was still just a big fish in a small pond. He told them that they had all tasted defeat, but the important thing was that they were breathing. They could start again, they could get stronger. His students nodded in agreement, and with that, Orhan led them back into the dungeon to begin training once more. And that is where we leave things for today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.